Welcome to Themes and Style Sheets. In this session, we're going to talk a little bit about the mobile templates that help define some styles, and then we're going to go ahead and look at OutSystems themes. We'll talk about what is included in a theme definition and the fact that themes cascade or override each other depending on the types of styles that are inside them. We'll then look at the individual style sheets that can be applied to different elements, and we'll talk about how we can customize those CSS style sheets and those CSS elements. We'll talk about the order in which the style sheets are loaded, and then we'll also talk about how to apply different styles or edit the different styles, because we have a number of different ways we can do that. So a lot of interesting things to cover. Let's go ahead and get started. So when we talk about mobile templates, when you go through the new application wizard, we're allowed to pick a template for our application. So if we're building a mobile app, we're given the choices of templates from the phone template, the tablet template, or the universal that can kind of handle both. And by choosing one of these templates, it gives us a starting point for the default types of styles. So obviously, if we choose phone, the styles and the sizes are going to expect a smaller screen and different types of elements. Same thing on the tablet side, things would be bigger. Universal, we have to do some work, which is why it's considered an advanced theme, because we have to do some manipulation, depending on whether we think it'll be a phone or a tablet. Now, once we select one of those templates will help define the overall look and feel of our application by having a theme associated with the application. So themes can officially be applied to a module inside of an application or a UI flow, and the UI flows are sets of screens, so the theme can be applied to a set of screens. Now by default, each module has a default theme, and all of the screens that get created inside of that module will be using that theme by default. So over here, we can see that in the user interface area, we have a themes folder, and by default, there is a to-do theme, because each module, and this is our to-do module has by default a default theme called the to-do theme. Now there are other modules here, so there's a module that is OutSystems UI Mobile, and it has some themes inside of it as well, which we'll talk about in a second. But not only can themes apply to the module, but we said they can also apply to the UI flows. So we could apply a special theme to the main flow, and if we wanted that to be different than the theme to the common flow, we could go ahead and change that as well. So there's a good bit of flexibility with how we apply the themes. Now, what is a theme? How do we define what a theme is? Themes are there to help us define what the common style properties for the UI elements are going to be. And our theme will always be the extension of the base theme. And we're going to see in a second that the base theme is really going to be overridden no matter what. The base theme will either be overridden by the phone theme or it will be overridden by the tablet theme. And in that particular case, when we say override, some of the styles may be overridden, but a number of the styles in the base theme can be used at any given time. But there is a style sheet that's going to define what that theme will look like. Inside of a theme, there also needs to be a common layout block defined, and there needs to be a grid type defined, whether it's fixed, fluid, or we can choose to have no grid. But a theme can be defined in any module, including a blank module. So by default, when we choose a mobile module, the mobile module will have a default theme. Blank themes will not create a theme, but it could have a theme if we created one inside of it. And the reason that might be important is that we might want to create a theme somewhere in a blank module so that we could share it between multiple different modules. And modules are allowed to have more than one theme inside them because we may have multiple UI flows. So when we look over here to the right, here we see our to-do theme. It could be made public and shared. This one isn't. The base theme that it's using is the phone theme, and here is its style sheet. And we could open this with the style sheet editor and then begin looking at the styles that are part of our to-do style sheet. It defines the grid type, and in this case it's fluid, and it defines the layout, which is going to be the common. So in the common UI flow, there is a layout block, and that layout block defines what our screen layout is going to be. Now, when we think about the themes, we mentioned that themes will cascade. So when we look at our to-do theme, its base theme is the phone theme. But if we actually opened up OutSystems UI Mobile, which is another module that we're leveraging to be able to have that phone theme, the phone theme actually has a base theme, and it's called the base theme. So the phone theme has a grid type and some information, and the phone theme has its own style sheet. If we go look at the base theme, we can select the base theme and see that it also defines the same grid type. It doesn't have any layout defined, but it has its own style sheet as well. Now all of this is grayed out because the base theme is what helps build up the phone theme, and the phone theme is part of the template that we choose when we start our app. So these aren't officially editable. And we don't need to necessarily edit these because in our to-do theme, if there are any parts of these styles that we'd like to override, we have our own style sheet. And we could open this, edit this style sheet, and override the styles that might have been defined in either one of these other themes. Now, when we look at the style sheets themselves, the style sheets allow us to define different CSS style classes, and the style sheets can be applied inside the theme. They can also be applied to screens or to blocks. And Service Studio provides us with a style sheet editor. And the editor is nice. It does syntax highlighting. It can also do autocomplete. And it has a special visual style editor inside of it. So over here to the right, you can see the style sheet editor. And we can get to the style sheet editor anytime we want by going to the top of the canvas area. And in the menu bar at the top, there's a little CSS icon. And if we click that CSS icon, it will bring up the style sheet editor for that particular resource. In this case, we can see a to-do detail page. So the to-do detail screen is here. And we can see that it starts with the base theme, which could be overridden by the phone theme, which can be overridden by our to-do module, and then our to-do screen. So this is the sort of highest level, the thing that is closest to what the user is going to see, and these would override anything underneath it if those happen to exist as well. And in the editor, we can see the nice color coding. So the syntax highlighting is there. You can do autocomplete in here. And if you wanted to change this particular style, you can go over to the visual style editor. And in this case, because we're trying to change the background color, you could go to the layout area and change the color. So here we can see that it says green. And if we wanted to edit that over here, instead of typing everything in by hand, we could begin editing in the visual style editor. So when we're going to customize the CSS, it is possible for us to customize any of the existing CSS classes, except for the ones from the base theme. One of the cool things about the editor is that any changes that you make are immediately visible in Service Studio. So if we came in and made a change to a color or a background or a header, if we were editing a screen, it would immediately show any of the changes. So it is reactive in the fact that anything we place inside of the style sheet will immediately affect all of the other elements that it might be applied to. And another important thing that's available now is CSS variables. And they can be used to accelerate and change our CSS classes even faster. And that's because we can define a variable and give it a value, and then use that variable in many places inside of the style sheet. And where that variable exists, it will be replaced with the value that is there for all of the uses of that variable. So how does that sort of work? Well, we could go to the root area and define a variable called color primary, and then give it a hexadecimal color, and we could say that this is going to be the primary color for our app. When we go to the header, and we wish in the header to define the background color, and we decide that we want it to be the primary color for our app, we can just say that we want to use the var and put some parentheses, and then use --color--primary, and then this value will automatically be applied as the background color. So we can define the variables once at the top, And then if we make the change here, wherever this variable is used, it will change all of those elements to that particular color. Now, the style sheets have a particular order. So as we edit them and as these things change, they're going to be loaded in the following order for the screens that we create. And that means that if any of these style sheets share style classes, that they will be overridden. So the first style sheet that's loaded is a style sheet for any of the blocks. So in this particular case, I might have a block. That block is given a style sheet, and we create the test class, and we give it a green background. So the screen would start with a green background whenever the test class is used. The theme would override whatever is defined inside the block. So the theme might have a test class defined inside of it and say, no, we're going to use yellow. And in that case, the yellow from the theme will override the green that came from the block. But the theme isn't the final style sheet loaded. The screen's style sheet is the final one. So inside of the style sheet for the screen, if the test class is set as red, then we get to red, which will override the yellow from the theme. So in this case, all three of the style sheets define this particular class. They give it a background color, but it will actually be the one from the screen that wins out in the end because it will override the others. And the reason for this order is that when we think of reusable web blocks, they may want to define how they look. But if they choose a color that might clash with the overall look and feel, so when we think of a theme for our application, it's the overall look and feel. If the block would clash with the theme, we'd want the theme to override it. And if the screen decides it wants to be different than the generic look and feel of the whole theme, we'd want the screen to be able to override that as well. So this order makes a lot of sense in a logical way of what we want to be able to control by the time we get to the screen. Now, last but not least, how do we apply or create these new styles? And there are a couple of different ways. We can open up the style classes, and in the dropdown will be all of the styles that are in style sheets that might apply to this container. So depending on where this container is, it can see all the different style classes, and we could choose one and apply it to it. The container can also go to its attributes area and define a specific style or define a class. When defining a style, it can use a piece of logic like an if test and say if some variable, which is dangerous, if is dangerous is true, then we'll use the color red because it's dangerous and we want to warn people. If is dangerous is false, we'll use color green. So it can define a specific style. It could also define the class itself. It could say if is dangerous is true, call it the danger class, use the danger class, and if is dangerous is false, then we won't use any class because we can use whatever color was defined as well. So that's a way to use the extended properties inside of the container to go ahead and be able to define properties that way. And then for a number of different elements, you'll also have the style editor. So there is a visual CSS editor, and when we stop configuring a component, so if we slide from the wrench to the paintbrush, and the wrench is actually showing us the properties, the paintbrush wants to show us the styles. If we then look at the styles of something like a container element, we could add style classes to it. We could change the fonts, color, size, and style to change the way the text looks. And then we could change the layout. We could change the alignment, the sizes, the margins, and even the color. So we can change a number of these different pieces, and this gives us a lot of control over how to style things. We can choose pre-existing classes and just use them quickly. We can define our own style or our own class if needed, and even make it dynamic so that we're allowed to use variables and change things on the fly. Or we can go in and edit this style directly without going to a style sheet. We can just sort of apply inline styles to the container itself. So that's it for our styles and other pieces. We've got through talking about the mobile templates. Those templates help define some of the themes that we're going to be using. We looked at what a theme actually defines from the grids to the layout to the different styles, and how themes will cascade. And then we looked at the style sheet definitions themselves, what elements can have the style sheets defined, and how we can customize that CSS. We talked about the order that they get loaded, and how to apply individual styles when we need to. So that's it for this unit on themes and style sheets. Thanks for listening.